The New York media has been incredibly busy this past week, and the Cincinnati Bengals suck. We're going to talk about it next here on No Butts About It. Hello, everyone. Welcome to No Butts About It. I am Josh Butts. Next to me is Chus in his basement in Pittsburgh, where they have somehow found a way to win football games with only field goals. It's super annoying. I hate it. We'll talk about that here at the end of the show. But first, we've got some breaking news. Technically, this first one, and then the other one happened yesterday. But New York's been busy. Both New York teams have been busy. First of all, the Jets. Stan was not able to join us today, but Joe Douglas, the New York Jets GM, has been fired. It was expected they'd move on from him at the end of the year, but the end of the year came a bit quicker for Joe Douglas than originally anticipated. And to me, this just begs the question, when will they start blaming Aaron Rodgers? And I don't know. Like, Joe Douglas definitely hasn't put together the best team, but he's had some draft successes, I would say. He brought in Garrett Wilson and Jermaine Johnson, and I think Mekhi Becton was under him, who struggled with injury, but definitely was an understandable pick. There's a long list of players that he drafted that I think is actually pretty good. Breece Hall being another example. But Trust, do you think we're at the point now where it's Aaron Rodgers' fault, or is it someone else's fault? Can we just keep pointing fingers?
Well, I feel like, in my opinion, it's not necessarily Aaron Rodgers' fault per se. I think in a way it was kind of Joe Douglas's fault. And the reason I say that is just because if you look at the past 5 seasons, I mean, the talent and everybody that he has probably invested in, other than a couple few people, they really haven't panned out that well. I mean, you invest in Zach Wilson, and then you don't invest in Zach Wilson. And then you bring in Aaron Rodgers and Davante Adams, who are both older in their careers. It's like trying to bring back that magic that they had in Green Bay, but it's just not there anymore. And this was the problem. This was the concern that I had earlier in the year when the trade happened with Davante Adams. I was like, I don't know if that magic's still going to be there or not. And I don't want to say that it's completely gone, because I haven't really been following too much on how well they've been connecting. I'm not a Jets fan, and I'm sure Stan would probably know better than I would. But I honestly do think in some respect it is Joe Douglas's fault, just because if you would have, he was the one making the decision to bring in Aaron Rodgers. He was the one that was making the decision to bring in these guys. Regardless, I mean, he is the GM. So, I mean, at the end of the day, like, whether it's the coach or whomever or upper management, I mean, obviously, like, unless it's the owner, like, trying to play the cards right, I mean, the coach, he could get easily overruled. So I do think this was a correct move by New York. I think Joe Douglas really hasn't, in my opinion, shown that he's, competent in creating a team. I mean, I know the Jets have had really bad luck over the last, decade or even longer with, creating teams and creating, really talented, units and lineups and whatnot. But I mean, there were weapons, there are offensive weapons and defensive weapons that these teams have had, but it almost felt like over this, I don't know how long Douglas has been. I know it's been more than like 4 or 5 seasons. I mean, if you look at these past 5 seasons, the Jets really haven't done anything special or shown any glimmers of hope. They've had players, and it's similar to the Giants. And I know we'll talk about them too, but other than a couple big boom players, like, okay, yeah, you have Breece Hall, you got Garrett Wilson. Even a couple years ago, you had Jamal Adams. I mean, there's really just, like, in my opinion, nobody that's really, formulated to create these type of teams. You look at all these other teams that are, like, really flourishing with some of these players and whatnot. And in my opinion, I think some of these teams that have, like, those single, players and whatnot, over the last couple of years have gone the next year and have been really good. I mean, even look at the Bengals. I mean, you guys had these boom players, your rookies, like their rookie year. Yeah, Joe Burrow got hurt, but then the next year you guys were a completely different team. You guys went from having, your 2015, 2016 seasons and stuff like that, where it's like, okay, you had your one playoff appearance and then you had your fall off to, okay, now we have a future here. And instead of having like another fall off or a disappointing and then investing in somebody else, you actually, even though despite the way that the Bengals are looking this season, you actually have some sort of future. And I, in a way, as a Jets, I'm not a Jets fan, but like from a Jets fan's perspective, I'm sure you're probably frustrated with how the direction's gone. I'm sure Browns fans are probably frustrated. I mean, they're probably even more frustrated to an extent than the Jets. I mean, they had everything and then they literally just traded away for Watson. But yeah, I don't know. I just, in my opinion, I think this was probably a good call. I don't know if firing him now really changes anything. I mean, it's not like he can make any, I mean, the deadline's over. So it's not like he can kind of formulate any trades. It will really do anything other than kind of scout or maybe pick up some free agents, but more or less, they're probably not going to do that because, it's not like anyone's like really hurt on their team. So, but yeah, that's my opinion. I don't know if you have a similar opinion or not, but I mean, I do, like I said, I do blame Rodgers because he hasn't been playing good, but I think that for for Joe Douglas, if you wanted, why would you, like after he tore his Achilles and all of these things and whatnot, like why, even like years ago or like whenever they first moved him here, why would you be willing to bring in Aaron Rodgers to begin with? Why weren't you working towards the future? I mean, like the Jets already, in my opinion, at that time weren't going to be this boom team. And like, I know Stan might be a little upset that I said that, but like, I didn't never really expected them. Like you look at like a Steelers, and in my opinion, I think the Steelers all they needed to win was a quarterback. And sure enough, we finally got that quarterback. We got two quarterbacks, which is awesome. But like, I feel like for the Jets, it wasn't like Aaron Rodgers, you plug him in and now this team is complete. I mean, this team had problems all over the field. And I think that, yes, I can blame Aaron Rodgers for not playing good, but I also blame Joe Douglas for investing in Aaron Rodgers to begin with.
Well, okay, so two things I want to address. First of all, I think there's a funny disconnect because I look at the Jets and I'm like, man, they got starters in their first round. And I'm like, he did well. And that's just because the Bengals haven't. We draft these first rounders and they aren't. I mean, they got Garrett Wilson, Breece Hall, Jermaine Johnson. Yeah, Zach Wilson didn't work out. But I'm like, man, they found some guys in the first round. He's drafting well. Whereas the Steelers will be like, hey, we've drafted this guy in the 7th round. He's a future Hall of Famer. So there's definitely a disconnect there in terms of what is considered good drafting. I think you're probably right. Maybe he wasn't, and as I think about it, I don't think he was actually as good at drafting as maybe I first thought when I was looking at those stars.
Well, and I mean, and not even necessarily the drafting part too. I mean, even you put that aside, I mean, you go figure. I mean, I don't remember where they were in the draft line this year, but like they easily could have, instead of investing in Rodgers and that whole thing, they probably could have gotten a pretty decent quarterback in this draft. I mean, we've seen the quarterbacks this draft so far, and a lot of them are pretty dang good. And like the Jets could have had one of those guys. Imagine Jaden Daniels slinging the ball to Garrett Wilson, or imagine somebody like, even Bo Nix, who's kind of coming up out of nowhere. Or even, I mean, we don't really know. I mean, obviously you wouldn't be able to get the first overall pick, but like, imagine you even had a Caleb Williams. That quarterback might be completely different. I mean, you just don't know. And so in my opinion, like I said, I just, yeah, but continue.
I like where they draft. I like they drafted Olu Fashanu out of Penn State, I believe was their pick this year. I know it was an O-lineman. I'm pretty sure it was Fashanu. And that was where they needed to invest because that O-line is rough. But do you think that Rodgers was Joe Douglas's decision, or was he an ownership decision? Because it really kind of seems like it was Woody Johnson really pushing for it. And then they went all in to get him. They brought in Randall Cobb. They brought in Alan Lazard. They brought in Nathaniel Hackett. They later traded for Devontae Adams. So like they have put everything into Aaron Rodgers on this team.
And see, and then in that at that point, if if you're looking at it from the perspective of the owners, then I think that it was ridiculous that they fired Joe Douglas because he didn't do anything. This was an ownership decision, and and he's not going to fight with his boss. He's going to say, okay, well, we'll do what we can to get Rodgers here. So, I mean, from that perspective, I would say Joe Douglas is not in the right to be fired here. I feel like this is ridiculous. I feel like they're just trying to put a Band-Aid over something that they already did. So, but if you're looking at it from a perspective of, oh, this was Joe Douglas's decision, like if the owners were pushing for it and Joe Douglas made the final call and he went with it, then I would be like, okay, yeah, probably Joe Douglas should be fired. If the owners made the decision and he was like, no, we're not going to do this. This is a bad decision. Then they were like, well, do it anyway, or you're fired. Then, okay, well then that's still like, I feel like at that point it's the owner's problem. It's the owner's fault. And they're just, like I said, covering the Band-Aid. And I'm noticing that because I got a report, this is hockey related. The Boston Bruins just fired their head coach and they're blaming the head coach for their faults. I genuinely, a lot of Bruins fans are thinking it's the GM's fault. And the coach being fired, who went 120, 40, and 8, which is a crazy stat line over the last 3 years, it's his fault. And I don't know if it's necessarily his fault, but I don't know.
I mean, they just, I don't, I mean, and I'm not saying Zach Wilson's a good quarterback. However, the Jets have won 36.4% of games with Zach Wilson as the starting quarterback. They won 34.2% with Sam Darnold as the starting quarterback. They've won 27.3% of games with Aaron Rodgers as the starting quarterback, which Aaron Rodgers' sample size is a bit smaller, obviously. But I don't think that this is the answer. I mean, they fired Robert Saleh and the defense got much worse. That wasn't the answer. I don't know that firing Joe Douglas is necessarily the answer. It's a reset, but are you going to continue to say that Aaron Rodgers is your full-on future, or are you going to commit to the rebuild?
No
way. Are you going to draft
a
quarterback?
They should. I think they should either draft a quarterback or I don't even know what quarterbacks are available this offseason, if any of them are even like worth
Daniel
it.
Jones.
Okay, well, Daniel Jones is still technically signed. They would have to trade for him and stuff. But I mean, it's one of those things for me where I don't know why you would. I mean, Aaron Rodgers is already 40. I mean, there's no way that this dude plays next year. I genuinely don't believe he's playing next year. No way. You think Aaron Rodgers is going to play next year?
I think Aaron Rodgers is stubborn. I think the more the media says Aaron Rodgers won't play next year, the more likely it becomes Aaron Rodgers plays next year.
Well, I think the Jets, I don't know how long he's only got a year left on his contract, right?
Let's go to
him and Adams both only have a year, I believe. And let's verify this.
We'll do some fact checking here. Aaron Rodgers is a free agent in 2026 after a void year.
Oh, year.
Yep. So if he's voided, he's an unrestricted free agent in 2026.
Okay, so they do have another year with him. Okay, well then he probably will play next year, and then he'll probably retire. So at this point, I guess we'll really know with Aaron Rodgers if it's Rodgers' fault or if it's the Jets' fault. If I was the Jets, I would dump the dumb cap that you have, like Davante Adams, Allen Lazard, and Randall Cobb. I would dump them and go get new wide receivers. Don't because listen, I have nothing against Allen Lazard. I don't, because I think he's a really talented wide receiver. But why would you bring in Davante Adams and Randall Cobb? I mean, Davante Adams fixed nothing for that offense. They fixed nothing. It did nothing.
I really liked that move too.
I didn't. I thought I was uncertain about it. People thought I was crazy. I was like, I don't see the magic happening. That first game, Steelers played the Jets. Steelers blew them out. And then the Jets still haven't looked at. I mean, Buddy went from like one weird team to another weird team. I mean, it's just I forget what it was. It was like, oh, Davante Adams went to bed 2-5 and woke up 2-5 or whatever it was. I'm like, oh wow, big change there. I mean, you're just going from the burning pot into the frying pan that is also burning. And I mean, I feel like I don't even remember what the saying is. Right now, but either way, that's my own analogy of it. Either way, both teams are burning. Both the Raiders and the freaking Jets are like up in flames right now. But In my opinion, no, I think it was ridiculous. I think you should dump the receivers. Randall Cobb, dump him. Dump Devontae Adams, and by that I mean don't sign them. Alan Lazard, yeah, maybe you can keep him around, but like quit bringing in all of these ridiculous players that you're not going to use. Your wide receiver core is saturated. Your running back core was saturated. I mean, you have like running backs like Izzy Abanikanda that are like 5th on the depth chart, and dude could probably easily be a running back 2 or 3 somewhere else. Like he was a really solid running back, but they don't use him because they had at one point Dalvin Cook and Breece Hall. It's like, why do you even have Dalvin Cook rostered, man? Like, you're not even going to utilize him. Like, he's like 3rd or 4th on your depth chart. You're going to use Breece Hall, obviously. Like, there's so many problems with the way that they do things over there that, okay, bringing in Rodgers, who cares? Oh, you're going to make him mad. Oh, you're going to make 41-year-old Aaron Rodgers mad by getting rid of Devontae Adams. What's he going to do? He's going to retire? Oh, boo-hoo. Yeah, maybe you can actually move on and work with your future. The Jets, yeah. No, I think I'm just up in arms.
Real quick, just two-word answer. Which quarterback do you think they should go after in the draft?
In the draft?
In the draft.
I mean, it would depend on where they fall. I mean, we also don't even know who's you know.
They're going to be early in the draft, but like of the guys that like we know for sure are heading to the draft. Like, is Shooter Sanders the answer? Is Jalen Milroe the answer? You know how I feel about Jalen Milroe. I don't think Jalen Milroe is the answer, but you don't know?
I don't know. I mean, I don't think it's Sanders. I mean, I'm looking at like, I don't even know. Some of these people, like,
maybe Cameron Ward.
I'm not high on Miami. I'm not high on Cam Ward on Miami, but like, that's the problem is like, I don't know also where these quarterbacks are going to go. I mean, I'm not like some of these quarterbacks. I mean, I don't think it's a terrible draft class if all of these people actually get, like, all right. So, I mean, just going to like look because I want like a genuine like idea because last year was pretty cut and dry. This year, we don't really have any idea of. Okay, let's look. Let's talk about this. Sanders, no, I don't think he's the answer. What?
Not a future Jet. If Chuss is the GM,
no. This is draft prospects from WalterFootball.com. Just for anyone clarifying, Texas. I mean, Quinn might be okay. I'm not high on Cam Ward. I think I mean you could end up like having because the ACC produces like hit or miss quarterbacks in my opinion. I mean you have people like Lamar Jackson and then you have guys like Kenny Pickett or like Nate Peterman from Pitt and then you have like some like I said Lamar Jackson or like even I mean I'm not high on him. I think Miami's been kind of weird this year. I'm not.
Nussmeier.
I think Jalen Milroe. I think he's going to be based on the fact that he goes to Alabama. I think that's the only thing that it's based off of. I don't think he's going to fix the Jets. I mean, I don't think Drew Allar from Penn State.
We all know they're going to end up with Drew Allar. They're gonna draft him above like Shooter Sanders or
I honestly really like Jackson Dart.
Okay.
But I don't know if they would actually draft him because he's like 8th projected out of all the quarterbacks. I like him. I think a lot of people don't talk about him. He's the Ole Miss quarterback. I actually forgot how much I liked him. He threw 6 touchdowns and 500 yards in one game a couple weeks ago. And I was like, dang, this guy might actually be like kind of sneaky.
So we do have to move on to another topic, but if he goes in the second round where it says he's projected, and obviously we're far out from the draft, we haven't even looked at prospecting yet, but they could go O-line again in the first round and then get Jackson Dart in the second.
I mean, and he's not, in my opinion, I mean, like, he might be one of those quarterbacks that ends up like, surprising as a second round. More recently, we haven't noticed a lot of quarterbacks in the second round be as prominent, but I mean, listen, Will Levis is doing okay. mean, he's not the greatest, but he's doing okay. Okay. I mean, where do you put okay on the ranking system?
I would think okay is like 15th, middle of the pack.
Okay, well, I look at okay as like competent.
Top 32.
Well, I mean, yeah. I mean, I feel like he's fine. I mean, he's whatever. Will Levis is whatever. Okay, is that better for you? I mean, I'll look at Will Levis's numbers while you start your next segment, I guess. Actually, no, wait. We have to keep this going because you know you're not going to want to cut this. Okay, yeah. Will Levis. Okay, yeah, but he stinks. Never mind. I agree. Yeah, he stinks. I actually thought Will Levis was doing a lot better. Yeah, eight touchdowns, 8 interceptions, and 3 fumbles is not good. But okay, put him aside. I mean, like second round quarterbacks don't always. I mean, I think Jackson Dart though could definitely he could be sneaky good. But I don't know if he would fix the Jets. I don't know. I don't know if any of these quarterbacks. I know we talked about it's. I don't know if it's actually as weak as we think. But in my opinion, I'm not high on any of these quarterbacks like I was last year.
I'm not either. But we'll talk about that more as the draft gets closer.